The Big Ten Conference relied on the medical advice and counsel of the Big Ten Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases and the Big Ten Sports Medicine Committee. Statement going on to say the fall sports included in this announcement, as Mike mentioned, men's and women's cross country, field hockey, football, men's and women's soccer, and women's volleyball. The Big Ten Conference will continue to evaluate a number of options regarding these sports, including the possibility of competition in the spring. Decisions regarding winter and spring sports will also continue to be evaluated. The Big Ten Conference is proud of its 14 world-class research institutions and has leveraged their resources and expertise to address this pandemic over the past 5 months. The Big Ten Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases and the Big Ten Sports Medicine Committee have engaged in extensive research and sharing of materials and conversations with federal, state, and local government agencies and professional and international sports organizations in order to track and better understand the daily updates surrounding this pandemic. Their advice and counsel have been invaluable as they have worked tirelessly over the past several months in their efforts to create and maintain a safe environment for athletics.
We are minutes away from getting the commissioner of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren, to join us. In the meantime, we get some reaction from a longtime analyst here, former head coach in the SEC and the Big Ten, Jerry DiNardo. Jerry, Dave and I mentioned a second ago, things seem so different. Not even a week ago when the schedule was announced with all that flexibility, and now the season has been pushed back to the spring at best. What do you think has changed in the last week?
Well, hard to tell, Mike, but we have to believe it's the research and the evidence about this heart condition. I do think that we need to know more information. I think we should have further explanation. I think people still are going to have a lot of questions to that question you just asked me because we really don't have a good answer. But I hope soon, by the end of the day, we would. What is the physical threat to our players that could not have been overcome this fall? I will say this, though. Yesterday and the day before, we didn't think there was going to be any football. I think people would say spring football is better than no football, although there's some complications to it. So I think it's a little bit of good news, bad news, Mike.
Right. What do you think went into the decision not to delay this by 2 or 4 weeks, but just to say we're going to fully wait a handful of months until the spring at best?
Well, I'm guessing the medical experts would say nothing's going to change in that period of time. Nothing may change in the spring either, but we certainly have a better chance of things getting better from a health perspective in the spring than we do in the next 3 or 4 weeks. The other thing was indecision. I think that once again, we now have a plan. It's a plan that we didn't know we were going to have. It's not a great plan, but it's certainly a plan, not what we wanted, but at least now, because there's a ton of logistic things that we're going to have to look at if we're going to play spring college football.
Well, what are some of those issues that would pop up? Because this is something, as we said at the top, this has never happened before. This is not something we can say, well, we can look back to 10 years ago when this happened. What's the first or second major issue that you see logistically that could happen if we play football in the spring?
Well, when to start, when to end, I think the biggest challenge from a coaching perspective will be roster management. Typically you have 85 scholarships in the fall. And at the end of the fall, let's say you lose 20 people, whether they leave early, whether they graduate. And so you go into spring practice with 65 returning scholarships, but then you get 20 more incoming freshmen, or you might get 10 incoming freshmen. Now, if I'm a senior or a junior and I'm not going into the NFL, now I want to play in the spring. Then the players that I've signed that want to come in early, you very well may be over 85 scholarships during a competition time. We're always over 85 at some point during the season. There's medical scholarships. There's a senior wanting to go to spring semester so he can graduate. So he's not part of the 85 because he's not competing. This might be the first time since we've been at 85 that athletic directors are going to have to manage over 85 playing at the same time. And we may need some NCAA relief Financially, we know all these schools are struggling. They may have more total athletes on scholarship in the spring than they've ever had before, with the least amount of revenue they've ever had coming in.
Well, you'd have to think logistically, the NCAA or whomever would have to make one-time exemptions for that, right?
Well, you would hope, but that doesn't mean the university would use the exemption. That's the next challenge, right? If the NCAA says, okay, you can play with a 90 scholarship roster, which we haven't done for several decades, some athletic directors may say to the head coach, no, we're going to play at 85. The NCAA could say those mid-semester transfers aren't eligible until the following year. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. And again, roster management is one of the biggest decisions you make in coaching, to make sure that it's stable and make sure that you have the best players available to you.
Jerry, it's always interesting talking to you because you have the perspective of being a head coach and being a head coach at different types of programs. You've said for years on here, there's no blanket statement you can say for all of college football of the values you have, or even in one league, because certain schools might compete for Big Ten championships every year. Certain schools are used to trying to compete for a bowl game. That being said, yesterday we had multiple head coaches come out and say that they were pretty upset and they wanted to play no matter what. How does that shake out in the coming hours, days, and weeks, that some head coaches seem to be pretty upset if there wouldn't be a fall season?
I think it shakes out like every other challenge a head coach has had. The ones that deal with the challenge the best will put the best team on the field. And we've never been through this. But I think if you ask them, would you rather the commissioner and the presidents decided no football until the fall of 2021? I don't think so. I think we have to understand this is a partnership between 14 schools. Not everybody is going to agree to everything, but in the history of the Big Ten, when there's been disagreements and disputes, once they're solved, all 14 or 10 or 11 or 12, depending on what year it was and how many members we had, we left the room locked arm, and I hope we do that again. It's altogether different. None of us expected this. A lot of things come to a coach unexpectedly. The ones that do the best job handling it usually have the most success.
Microcosm for life, not just football coaching, for sure. Hang tight for just a second, Jerry. I want to remind everyone the reason we are on right now is the Big Ten has decided to postpone fall sports, saying the Big Ten Conference announced the postponement of the 2020-2021 fall sports season, including all regular season contests and Big Ten championships and tournaments, due to ongoing health and safety concerns related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In making its decision, which was based on multiple factors, the Big Ten Conference relied on the medical advice and counsel of the Big Ten Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases and the Big Ten Sports Medicine Committee. Jerry, one of these, this isn't just a Big Ten story. This is a national story because how it affects everybody else. And what's interesting is we've heard from different conferences saying that they are following the advice of their medical doctors and scientists, as they should be. But it seems that there are different things that different conferences are hearing from different people. That seems confusing, I think, to the average fan. I'm curious your thoughts on, does the Big Ten start a domino of other major conferences, or do other major conferences say this really has no effect on us?
I think most other conferences are going to say this doesn't and won't impact our decision. And there's a great debate that has been going on for years, Mike, whether we need a commissioner for all of college football or a czar. You could look at this crisis either way. You could say this is a reason to have a commission of all college football so that we're all making the same decisions. I take the other position that I believe this is a regional sport. It's nationally watched, but it's governed regionally because different regions look at things differently. And we're seeing this play out. We've seen conferences move the schedule back. We've seen the Big Ten was going to start early. We've seen conferences not play at all. Now we're seeing the Big Ten conference playing in the spring. What fits the Big Ten or what fits the SEC doesn't necessarily fit the other conference. So I don't believe this will have an impact. It might put some pressure on the health professionals that are advising those other leagues, because how could the medicine be all that different? But I don't know that it'll put enough pressure where commissioners and presidents of other leagues will do it just because the Big Ten did it.
We're going to hear from the Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren in just a matter of moments. And today's story is the postponement of the schedule. But tomorrow's story, Jerry, will be the possibility of spring football. How that could look. I mean, when could you start that logistically? Is March too cold, you think, to start playing football?
Well, I think you want to figure out when you want to end, right? And then work backwards because of what is going to be typically the normal 2021 fall season, right? So how much space are you going to need between this spring season and the next fall season? Obviously, weather is an issue. Other sports, venues, travel. There's going to be so many things that you have to think through because we've never been through it. And again, I think if there's a positive to this, is if we weren't going to play in the fall, the sooner we made a spring decision, the better. The sooner we weren't going to play non-conference games, the sooner we made a conference-only schedule. I think that's been what the commissioner has done. That seems to be the way he works, and I think that's the right way to work. So if we would have made a decision in 3 weeks, Mike, the answer to your question would have been 3 weeks later. Now we can start. You talk about coaches being disappointed and all that. I'll tell you one way to get past disappointment. Start focusing on how we're going to do this in the spring. Put it to rest. We're not playing in the fall. Let's get ready for spring and have a bunch of really smart people look at that and come up with the best answer. There's no sense complaining about this, looking back about this. Let's get ready for spring football. And let's hope that happens. There's no guarantees, but let's have a really good plan.
Right. Jerry DiNardo, we appreciate your insight on this bizarre and historic day. Thank you, Jerry.
You bet, Mike. Thanks.
The University of Wisconsin releasing a statement from Athletic Director Barry Alvarez saying, quote, "As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every aspect of our lives, both personally and professionally. For many students and staff, it has brought anxiety and stress, and we are all looking forward to a time when things begin to look and feel more normal." In quotes. For many months, we had hoped that the return of fall collegiate sports might be an opportunity to restore some sense of normalcy and provide brighter moments for our university, our city, and our state. Even so, today's decision by the Big Ten to postpone the fall 2020 sports season is the correct one. So again, those are the words of Barry Alvarez, the athletic director at Wisconsin. Dave Revson, Mike Hall with you, and we are pleased to be joined right now by the commissioner of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren. Kevin, thanks so much for giving us your time. I know it's been a crazy period here for you, but let's go back to the last time that you and I talked. It was 6 days ago. We had the release of the fall schedule. And we talked a lot about the flexibility that was built into that schedule, the ability to delay the beginning of the season, the fact that you could move many games within that schedule. What has changed in the 6 days from kind of lauding the flexibility in that schedule to saying, we're done, we're not even going to try it? Really sorry. We obviously have lost Commissioner Warren's audio there. I assume we will get that back here in very short time. But
you know what it is, Dave? It's a microcosm of, honestly, the world we're in. Everything, the fact that interviews can't be done from a studio with safe hookups.
I'm told we do have him back. So I'm going to go back now to the Commissioner. Commissioner Warren, I think you heard the question because you began answering it. But what changed between Wednesday and today?
Yeah, Dave, I mean, one of the things that we promised ourselves that this was going to be a fluid situation. This was going to be a day-to-day situation. And we would be on a perpetual state of just observing, gathering information, and doing everything we possibly could to have fall sports. That being said, our overarching reason and the overarching issues that we had to always keep at the top of our mind was the fact, and I've said it from the first day that I started at the Big Ten, that the health, the safety, the wellness, and both physical and mental for our student athletes was going to be at the top of my list. And as things began to evolve, you look at the number of cases that are spiking, the number of deaths, not only in our country, in our states where many of our schools are located, but worldwide, is that I promise that all the decisions that we will make during my tenure here at the Big Ten will always put the mental and physical health and safety and wellness of our student athletes at the center. And when you look at this decision, we just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty at this point in time in our country, and to encourage our student athletes to participate in fall sports. And I take this responsibility seriously, and I will continually do everything in my power to make sure that we put our student athletes in a position to be empowered and to be elevated. But as people first, and as students, and understand they're not professionals. These are amateur athletes, and they deserve an opportunity to be able to participate in a healthy and safe manner.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago, that you will put the health and welfare of the student athletes first. So what 6 days ago, with that still first and foremost in your mind, put you in a position where you felt comfortable releasing a schedule, albeit saying several times, hey, we may not play this schedule, but you still released it. So with those same goals in mind, what changed 6 days later that led you to believe that even though you'd had the same goals 6 days ago that you still have today, you just can't do it?
And Dave, that's a fair question, is that we always have to plan. And so we wanted to plan ahead, for a possible season, made it very clear that the season may not actually come to fruition. We felt it was important to plan, to organize a schedule that if we were fortunate to play fall sports, and especially football, that we would have a schedule in place. But, 6 days is 6 days. And I made it very clear also that this was a day-to-day situation. And as we began to gather information during these last 6 days, especially from our medical experts, we do have a task force in the Big Ten for emerging infectious diseases. And we also have a sports medicine task force that's comprised of many doctors and trainers, people who I have the utmost medical respect for. And I just said from day one that it was important. I'm not a physician, but it was going to be very important that on a day-to-day basis that we would listen and follow and understand and appreciate and embrace the advice from our medical experts. And that's what we're doing here. It's a holistic decision. There is too much uncertainty now for us to feel comfortable to go forward and have fall sport in the Big Ten. And we just need to constantly do the right thing from a medical standpoint to make sure that our student athletes have an environment that remains both healthy and safe.
What did those medical experts tell you, Kevin?
There's too much uncertainty. We have a lot of uncertainty going on now. And even questions that we ask and still ask. And it doesn't mean that we're giving up forever. This is really our continuation of work and an evolution. We're going to continually have to gather information and look forward to the future. But there's so much uncertainty. And as we asked questions 2 weeks ago, some questions were answered, but then you ask more questions, and then maybe those questions are answered, but then there's new questions. And then you ask questions even today. And it's not only in the Big Ten, I think just across the country and in the world, there is so much uncertainty about this virus. This is a novel virus. It is spreading at alarming rates. I believe there's over 5 million people worldwide and 160,000 deaths that have occurred. This is a serious virus. And, we were able to start practice last week. So there are many times in these type of decisions that you can have great plans. And I want to commend all of our Big Ten 14, our 14 Big Ten institutions. They've done a wonderful job. And our student athletes have worked hard to prepare. Our coaches have worked hard, our athletic directors, our chancellors and presidents, and all of our administrators. Our senior women administrators and faculty athletic reps, people have come together to do everything we possibly could do to have a fall season. And But as you get closer to, it's one thing to make plans, and then it's another thing to really to put those plans into place and to start seeing what's happening and hearing what's happening from a practice standpoint on a lot of the issues as far as, social distancing and contact tracing and, testing. There are just a lot of issues, not only in the Big Ten, but in society that we're trying to get answers to. And it's one thing to try to get answers in certain areas of your life. But then when there are certain other areas, especially when it comes to your health and safety, that a lot of the questions that we need to make sure that we have answered now that we were getting closer to really going to the next phase of practice and getting closer to actually to compete, to have competition, is that there are just too many uncertainties to feel comfortable from a medical standpoint to proceed forward.
Explain to us the formal process of making this decision.
Yeah, I mean, the formal process, is always collectively you meet with the chancellors and presidents, but there's been a lot of meetings, Dave, as you can imagine. I mean, we've had meetings with many of our coaches and our athletic directors, and this is something. And really for the last couple months, not just this week, but for the last couple months, this has been around the clock endeavor we've spent a lot of time and energy, and it's not over because the Big Ten has been in existence for 125 years, and I'm sure it'll be in existence hopefully for many, many years in the future. And so we'll continually meet, we'll continually discuss these issues, we will continually rely on the expertise of our medical experts. And we'll continually, remain, positive. I know this is a very, very trying time. This is one of those days that you really hope in your career that you never have to deal with these kind of issues. But that's not the case in life. We have to deal with what's been presented in front of us. And I just feel very important, and all of us do in the Big Ten. Although we're highly competitive. We're highly competitive individuals in a conference. We really do strive each and every day to be exceptional, both academically and also athletically. But we also want to be exceptional in how we treat our student athletes. And when you just get a sense of the uncertain nature of this virus and information that is presented on a daily basis, and every day that goes by, you strive to really learn and read and study more. And this is an uncertain time, not only in our country, it's an uncertain time in our 11 states where our 14 schools are located, but it's an uncertain time in our world. And so we're doing everything we possibly can to gather the best advice, to make the best decision based upon where we are. And at this point in time, the uncertainty involving the medical situation and, having our student athletes compete in fall sports, we just did not believe that it was prudent at this point in time.
I want to understand the process of the decision-making a little better. I'm assuming there's a vote. Was the vote unanimous?
Dave, from a vote standpoint, I can tell you one thing about it is that our schools, we don't always agree. And I can only talk about since I've been here. We don't always agree, but I think people understand, and I take that from a passionate standpoint, that we will be together in the Big Ten, and so I just think it's important to make that very clear. And I would rather not have a detailed discussion about your question about is a vote unanimous or not unanimous, but this is a decision that was made on a collective basis, and I just want to express to you that we will continually do everything we possibly can at every level in the Big Ten to make sure that our student athletes are respected, encouraged. And I know this, many people may not agree with the decision that we've made today, and I understand that. I understand the passion associated with it, but we have a responsibility as a conference to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to keep our student athletes in an environment where, one, they can get a world-class education, earn a world-class degree, but then also compete athletically in a safe and healthy environment.
I do want to get into one particular statement kind of along those lines of, and I totally respect, I get it, that you don't want to reveal the specifics of the voting. That being said, Scott Frost came out very publicly yesterday, the Nebraska head coach, and said that if the Big Ten wasn't going to play, they might explore the possibility of playing elsewhere. Is that something that a Big Ten school can do within the parameters of the conference agreement?
David, I'll just say this. I know yesterday, for everyone included, yesterday, this whole last couple days, today, is very, very emotional. We have some of the best coaches, I believe, from a conference level standpoint in all of college football, and they are passionate. And the reason why they're great coaches is because they have great passion and they work hard and they're intelligent, and I understand that. So I know there were many statements that were made yesterday. There were many interviews that were done yesterday. I'm sure there are going to be many other statements made today and in the future. But I just take those statements as really a point of passion and supporting and representing their universities and their student athletes. And so I understand that. But as I sit here today, again, we have 14 institutions in the Big Ten Conference, and we've been together. I plan for us to continually be together and work collectively to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to make sure that we keep our conference strong. We keep our conference very strong academically and also very strong athletically. So I understand, the passion. I understand the many things that have been said, and I can expect the many things that will be said. But I'm proud to be in the Big Ten. It's been a challenging year so far for many people on multiple levels. But I just want people to know that we're doing what we believe at this point in time in the best interest of our student athletes, and that is their mental, their physical, and their emotional health, safety, and wellness.
Kevin, I just want to get clarity on that question. Were Nebraska or anyone else to say they're going to play elsewhere, could they do it?
Dave, again, I know what was said, and these are things that I'm sure there'll be a lot of other issues that will arise or be raised that we'll address at the appropriate time. Today's not the appropriate day to do that. Okay. There are no games today, and I respect your question, but at this point in time, I would just like to focus on our announcement and doing the things that we need to do and should be focusing on, and not focusing on some issues, because there's so many issues that we're in the process of dealing with at multiple levels. And as you can imagine, and I know you can respect, this has been a challenging week collectively. Today's been a very challenging day from an emotional standpoint, and I'm sure the foreseeable future will be in the same way. But we're going to continually work hard. We're going to continually work with our medical people. The world's not ending today. And we'll do everything that we possibly can to make sure we'll gather information, prepare, plan, and create an environment that our student athletes will be able to participate in when it's safe and there's less uncertainty.
Fair enough. Definitely respect where you're coming from. It's interesting. I had a conversation this weekend with someone who had knowledge of the discussions, and they talked about the myocarditis issue and that was a huge stumbling block, and essentially said to me, that may prevent us from having a path forward because of the concern, because of the uncertainty. I mentioned to Mike at the top of the show, you think of Reggie Lewis and Hank Gathers, these high-profile heart deaths in the history of sports, and myocarditis was linked to both of those deaths. What impact did the emerging information on that issue have on your decision?
Dave, all of those different things, and like you said, if for anyone who's been keeping up with the effects of COVID-19 and what it has done or can do or will do to the human body, there has been a lot of discussion about myocarditis. So that's been a discussion as of late.
Kevin,
that's not the primary reason. All of those items from a medical standpoint, you have to consider. I know there's been a lot of discussion about that, but overall, when it comes down to it, is just the litany of things that created this state of uncertainty that we need more clarity on from a health and wellness and medical standpoint. But again, it is sad. That's a concern. Anytime you're talking about the heart of anyone, but especially a young person, you have to be concerned. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to keep our student athletes safe.
Kevin, will the schools or the conference in any way share the medical information that they've been getting publicly? Particularly given that all but one school in the league is a public university. just to help people understand where the league's coming from, but also maybe to aid others as they try to figure out what the best route is to try to navigate through COVID-19?
Dave, I would expect, again, and not only in the Big Ten Conference, I would expect that, other A5 conferences or other colleges or universities, I know there's a lot of studies that are going on now, not only locally, but nationally and internationally. I mean, this is a pandemic, and this pandemic is not only in our 11 states where the 14 Big Ten schools are located. This is a worldwide pandemic. So I know there's been a lot of sharing of information and a lot of great articles that have been written in medical magazine and studies, and I'm sure there'll be many more. And so any way that we can help, in the Big Ten to address this issue, to create an environment where people can learn and understand, all the things that we know about COVID-19 and ways that we can to inform individuals, quite naturally, we want to be involved with that. But again, there's been a lot of sharing of information locally, nationally, and internationally. This is the focus of our world right now. We still remain, in a pandemic from a health and safety standpoint. And so anything that we can do with our 14 Big Ten institutions and our world-class, research components of our institutions and our hospitals, I know we're going to do that, to hopefully continually do what we can to make sure that we get on the right side of where we are with the COVID-19 pandemic.
You mentioned the sharing of information. How much have you been in touch with the other Power 5 commissioners? I mean, for instance, it's gotten a lot of publicity today. There was an infectious disease expert who is advising another Power 5 conference who said he feels that we're in a position where we could play football safely. So has there been an exchange of information among the commissioners and the university presidents?
Yeah, we've been in regular contact with the A5. I mean, I talk with the other A5 commissioners, really almost on a daily basis, but very regularly. We're in close communication. And again, there's so much that's going on, in our conference that we have to focus on. The total A5 conferences are located in different locations around the country. And all of us have different issues. Some are similar, some are different that we're dealing with. But again, I have confidence that they'll do what's in the best interest of their conference, of their student athletes at the appropriate time, whenever that is. So I understand, but we have a very good working relationship. We do communicate with each other. But I feel very comfortable today based upon the information regarding our 14 institutions in our 11 states that we made the correct decision at this point in time based upon the information that we have.
Commissioner, what would it take for you to feel comfortable with playing in the spring? Your statement left open that possibility. What would that have to look like?
And again, Dave, I think this is what we'll be working on here over the next days and weeks and months is continually, as I said earlier, I mean, this is where the work continues. We've been working, we'll continually work. We'll continually gather information. We'll rely on our medical experts internally in the Big Ten. We'll talk, have conversations with our athletic directors and coaches, our chancellors and presidents and others within our Big Ten family. And then we'll seek to hopefully to be able to, address the issues of the opportunities if we can have many of the fall sports that we're planning to have this fall. We can play those in the spring, including football. So, I mean, we've already, as you can imagine, with what we've been going through these last couple months, we've been talking about various scenarios just from scenario planning. And so we will start focusing on what we can do from a spring standpoint. And that's why it's so important, we're postponing this season and we'll look toward the future, which will be very important. And we'll continue those discussions and we'll continually allow the medical information that we have to guide our decisions and do what's in the best interest of our student athletes. So we will absolutely start to get into greater detail as far as opportunities that exist in the spring.
Kevin, you have a son who plays football in the SEC, so I know you're a parent going through this as well, and I've spoken to other parents, and it's an agonizing decision. How are you going to deal with his decision?
I mean, Dave, as I said, as you can imagine, this has been, an emotional time, as working at the Big Ten, but also as a parent. And so we know we have decisions to make. My focus has really been on doing what's best for the Big Ten now. But again, you're right. We have family decisions to make. But up until now, I've have trusted what we've done here in the Big Ten. Do trust what we have done, and we'll continually trust in the future that we'll work together and make the right decision. So today has been quite naturally an interesting day last week, and really even the last couple months. I mean, even when we, just started this COVID-19 journey together in March. I mean, as you can imagine, I know we all have felt it, even for individuals like yourself who have young people who you've raised, your children who you love more than anything on the face of the earth, who will be going back to school. There's a lot of open questions involved. And again, sometimes it may be, easy to forget what we're facing. I mean, this is a very complicated virus. We need to do everything we possibly can to make sure we make the right decisions. And so I know parents, I mean, although I work at the Big Ten, but also I am a parent and a husband, and we all have, personal issues that we'll deal with at the appropriate time. But today, my focus is on making sure that we made the right decision for the Big Ten Conference.
Kevin, I know this was an agonizing decision for you to make. You and I have spoken many times here since the COVID-19 pandemic began, and we spoke a lot about what a challenging time this has been for everyone in college athletics, and for you in particular, taking over in a new position. We are incredibly grateful for your leadership and really grateful for the time that you have given us here today on what I know has to be a very difficult day.
Dave, thank you very much. And again, it is not only we're going to just get through this together. I'm confident when we turn around at some point in time in the future and look back over 2020, it will be a time that collectively as a country, but in the Big Ten, that we really came together. We learned a lot about ourselves. We're going to remain positive, and we will continually be an absolutely dominant conference, not only academically, but athletically, and make a difference in the world. So I appreciate the time. I appreciate the interview, and I hope you and your family stay healthy.
Same to you, Commissioner Warren. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We heard Kevin Warren talk about how emotional things have been. This is an emotional statement just a few minutes ago from Nebraska. This is a joint statement from the head coach, their AD, their president, and their chancellor. We are very disappointed in the decision by the Big Ten Conference to postpone the fall football season, as we have been and continue to be ready to play. We will continue to consult with medical experts and evaluate the situation as it emerges. We hope it may be possible for our student athletes to have the opportunity to compete. Our breaking news coverage will continue here on BTN. Ohio State, one of the favorites to win the national title this year. What does their athletic director, Gene Smith, have to say? We talk to him in 1 minute. This comes from Penn State's athletic director, Sandy Barber. We support the Big Ten's decision to postpone fall sports. I know this was not an easy decision or one taken lightly by those involved. However, it was the decision the university presidents, Commissioner Warren, and the athletic directors believe was best for the long-term health and safety of our student athletes. While this is difficult news for our student athletes, coaches, and staff in already uncertain times, I know we will get through this as a Penn State family and be better for it. Our student athletes will continue to perform at a high level in the classroom and in the community, while also continuing to prepare for our return to the sport in the future.
More statements, this one from the athletic director of the University of Maryland, Damon Evans. Quote, the decision announced today by the Big Ten Conference was made in the best interest of the health, safety, and well-being of our student athletes. I know that for our student athletes, returning to campus in the fall is synonymous with the opportunity to compete at the highest level in the sport they love. Not being able to compete this fall is disappointing for all of us, but I have every confidence they will remain resilient and strong in these trying times. We will continue to support every one of them and will work diligently with university leadership, local and state officials, and the conference to make every effort to provide competitive opportunities for our student athletes.
Howard Griffith, our longtime BTN analyst, former player at the University of Illinois and Super Bowl champion, joins us now for reaction to this. Howard, you can already tell on social media this is not at all a popular move among fans right now. Perhaps in the future we will look back at it being the right move. But right now, what's your reaction?
I'm not shocked, Mike, at all. I thought things were heading in this direction. And when you talk and listen to the commissioner, he's committed to making sure that the student athletes are going to be safe from a health standpoint. And I know it's still going to be difficult for fans because they're going to talk about what's changed over the last couple of days. But his responsibility, as I've been saying, someone has to make the tough decision. And it's not going to be a popular decision, but this decision has been made. And now the young people have to allow that to settle in along with the coaches and now develop their plan to move forward.
A lot of people have been talking about how perhaps the safest place for a college athlete this fall is with teams, consistently in practices where they're getting tested, where they have structure, where there's incentives for them to not do the normal things that a college student would do because they have to be safe and healthy in order to play. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think they do need to still be on campus. I think they still need to be in that type of environment for many reasons. I think from a mental health standpoint, there's going to be a lot of depressed and upset young people, not just football players, that seasons have just been wiped away just like that. And they need to be in a situation where they still have the support. And also when you look at being around their teammates to be able to talk and continue to be able to work out, that's what they have to be able to do. And hopefully the NCAA, along with the Big Ten, it allows their players to be able to stay on campus, because I think that's going to be huge, and not just stay on campus, but still be able to do some activities so that they can keep the edge that they're going to need to have as they move through this fall without sports.
Howard, what's your take on what's happening in Lincoln? You had the head coach yesterday, or this weekend, I should say, the last couple of days, say basically that they want to play no matter what. The statement we just read was indeed emotional. They still seem upset about it. What's your take on all that?
I think you should be upset. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's part of the process that you have to be upset, but then you have to also be able to take a step back soon and then be able to look around and see, are we doing exactly what we need to be doing? I think one of the things that's happening, right, you're hearing from universities and coaches and players, I love the fact that they're fighting for the players. I absolutely love that. But the reality is they've been doing testing, they've been doing the right things, and that's great. But now we're getting ready to come into another area where the rest of the students are going to come back to campus. And I think there's just still too many unknowns about that. Testing is obviously important. People point to the NBA, the WNBA, and what's going on there. They're doing a great job, but that's because they're inside of a bubble. When you look at the NBA spending $75 million on testing alone, that's not something the Big Ten or college athletics can handle or wants to handle. So I think we can deal with it and understand it. And if you want to go out and try to figure out what you can do, now I think there will be some challenges to that. But I think you want to go out and continue to try to find a way for your young people to play. Go ahead and do that. But I think at the end of the day, you're also there are some rules that you have to follow to be a part of this conference, and those will take precedent.
Howard, before we let you go, you're not just a former player, you are the father of a current college football player. And you talked a minute ago how it's okay to be upset about this. What would be your message to a football player who was so, set on playing this fall, and now whereas they might not get to play at all?
Mike, I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I don't know what to say. I don't really have the words necessarily that are going to make sense outside of I understand that you're hurt, you're upset. But what we have to do also is be able to move forward. How are we going to move forward? I've talked with him about, hey, maybe you need to double up on some more classes. You're going to have more time on your hands now. You're going to have to be able to utilize that time wisely. And that's going to be one of the things I think that I'll talk to him about. But the reality of this is he's still in a situation where his conference or the ACC is still trying to push forward. But he also understands what the decision and what could happen now that the Big Ten has stepped out and postponed. He understands that there's going to be a ripple effect and other conferences are going to be looking, and that could be right around the corner for him. But really, it's about compartmentalizing, trying to stay as focused as you can, and making sure that you get all your questions answered. That's what needs to happen. You need to start to find out about eligibility questions. What happens if I decide to opt out? Can I still be a part of the team as far as working out is concerned? These are really questions that he's going to have to try to find out. And as a family, we're going to have to make some tough decisions coming up.
Yeah, and I wonder how many of those even have answers right now, or those answers yet to be determined. Howard Griffith.
And that's why so many people are frustrated, Mike, right now. That's the reality. We're getting information, but people aren't getting the information that they think that they want or deserve. And it's just part of the process.
Right. And that's understandable completely. These are, as we've said 1,000 times, unprecedented time. Howard, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Again, the Big Ten postponing all of its fall sports for 2020. The Big Ten Conference, again, and releasing this statement right around 3 o'clock Eastern time that this includes all regular season contests and Big Ten championships and tournaments due to the ongoing health and safety concerns related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In making its decision, which was based on multiple factors, the Big Ten Conference relied on the medical advice and counsel of the Big Ten Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases and the Big Ten Sports Medicine Committee. Dave Revson and Mike Hall with you here in our Chicago studios. And again, it's very interesting to talk not just with the commissioner, but with Howard Griffith as well. These become very personal decisions for a lot of people. And again, families trying to make the decision for what's the best course of action for them. We've already seen some student athletes, both in our conference and in other conferences, decide they were going to opt out even if the games were going to be played.
That's what I thought what Howard said was simple but interesting of it's okay. That if you want to be upset right now, it's understandable. In the Big Ten alone, like you mentioned, whether it's Rondale Moore or Rashad Bateman or Micah Parsons, there are players who've said, I'm not even interested in being a part of this already before today's announcement. There is, an Indiana lineman whose mother has already gone on social media and said that this is a legitimate thing and no one can really protect you from this. It's hard for everyone to deal with this.
Yeah, no doubt. We saw some reaction yesterday from Columbus, from head coach Ryan Day, the Ohio State football team, again advocating for his players and saying they want to play. We do have the athletic director at Ohio State now, Gene Smith, who is on with us. Gene, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us. It was obvious there was a strong movement within your team. Justin Fields, maybe among the two most prominent players in college football heading into this year, along with Trevor Lawrence, making it very clear that he wanted to play. You had your head football coach saying the same thing. What is Ohio State's stance on the decision that was made today?
Well, obviously, we would have preferred to play. We were very aligned in our position that we felt that we could make it happen, but we knew that the possibility to postpone or cancel was a real possibility. Happened a little earlier than we would have liked, but the medical experts who provide us great advice helped us understand that we needed to do what we needed to do today. The health and safety of our student athletes are first and foremost. We're disappointed. We really are. We felt that we have put in place outstanding protocols here, as our student athletes shared. So we felt that it was a possibility. So wish we could have had a little bit more time to evaluate, but we certainly understand that this was the time that we had to pull the plug.
So, Gina, I just want to understand your statement off the top there where you say you would have preferred to play. I mean, I know you'd rather play football than not play football, but you're saying even given the information that you had, that Ohio State would have voted to continue at this point and not to shut everything down?
No, we stand with the league. We understand that the medical advice that we received, we understand that. We were getting ready to put on pads. And that was a point, that was a moment where, the science began to become real. And we supported the fact that we needed to have to make a pause. So we would have preferred to play like everybody else with the passion that our student athletes have. But at the end of the day, the medical advice and the science overruled where we were today.
Can you give me any sense, and can you give people a sense who are trying to understand this and kind of come to grips with the decision, what that medical advice was? I mean, other than kind of a broad, hey, we don't necessarily think this is safe. Was there something that resonated with you or with the other ADs or the presidents where you just said, man, we just can't continue down this path?
Well, the contact tracing is one issue. Obviously, when you move into pads and full contact, the contact tracing is an issue. And then the long-term effects. We just don't know. This is a virus that we don't have data on, historical data. So the long-term, short-term and long-term effects that it has on a person is concerning. We felt that it was important to respect that and make sure that we embrace the spring concept. I know there's a lot of challenges around that. There's a lot of issues around that. But as I told our team today, I'm going to wake up tomorrow with a new vigor, a new passion, to try and think out of the box, to think about the spring, to give them an opportunity to compete and play the game they love. So they have their scholarship, they have the ability to get their education, they have access to our facilities and services. So I'm going to try my best to figure out how can we help this possibly be done in the spring.
Gene, you mentioned the contact tracing, and one of the things I've heard from a lot of people is, well, explain to me why it's safe for students to come back to campus. And a lot of these schools, they are coming back to campus, but it's not safe for the football players to play football. And it seems on the face fairly obvious to me, but I mean, again, we're talking about a full contact sport versus people socially distancing, and if they do go to class, wearing masks while they do it. I mean, you talk about that contact tracing, and what you're saying is this is a contact sport, a collision sport. People are constantly coming in contact with one another, and there was just no way to separate that out. Am I understanding you right when you talk about the contact tracing in that way?
Yeah, each game is different, as you well know. It could be anywhere from 70 plays a game to 90 plays a game. In some places, 100 snaps a game. Just depends. But you have contact constantly. Now, the effort to try and create a clean field through testing and things of that nature, a real possibility. But the reality is the game is not like sitting in a classroom. It's not like walking across campus. It's not like wearing masks while you're in a lab. It's full contact. So while I understand the position that our medical people had around that, and I respect them, I know that people would have that question and draw that parallel. But it is different. You have practices, multiple practices where there's constant contact. So I understand it, and I want to make sure that we not put our kids in harm's way when we ultimately have experts providing us outstanding advice along the way.
I asked this of Commissioner Warren. I'm interested in your take as well, just given the juxtaposition of the 6 days from the schedule release to the cancellation. What happened in that time period? Was there one specific straw that broke the camel's back, or was it just an accumulation?
Yeah, I think it's accumulation more than anything. When you look at the aggregate of issues, as ADs, we were just planning. We had our head down. We're managers. We're rolling. We're planning. And then there's parallel things happening. Kids are practicing. Things are going on, and information is coming to you. And so information began to come, and we started to evaluate that, and we ended up where we ended up.
What was the conversation that you referenced earlier with your team? What was that conversation like?
Well, we we really were really sad and disappointed we couldn't provide them the opportunity. And that's what I told them. I told them I failed them. I feel I did because we weren't able to create the ultimate protocols for the game itself where we could feel comfortable playing it. And I shared with them, I feel like I failed them, and I apologized to them and told them that, I'm going to wake up tomorrow with a passion to see if we can figure out a way for them to compete in the spring and play the game they love. Shared with them that if they So they have a lot of things to be thankful for. So spend the night to go through your depression, but wake up tomorrow with a new passion and a new focus on how you're going to attack the day and attack the future, because that's life. That's what you have to do. And so this is disappointing at this point in time, but our president was phenomenal. Christina Johnson, she challenged everything to try and look at whether a delay was the right thing to do or whether the cancellation and postponement was the right thing to do. She challenged, and I couldn't be more proud of her leadership. We would have ultimately preferred to go to September 26th or October 1st with the start of the season. But the science came to us so fast, and so we just had to move.
I smiled when you said to deal with your depression overnight, because I feel like I'm going to be doing the same thing here tonight. It's devastating for all of us who love this sport and who love the competition of college football and the pageantry and everything that goes along with it. What can you tell us about winter sports, about basketball, about some of the other sports that people love and are passionate about? What will you need to see, Gene, in order to be able to compete in those seasons?
Well, I had to speak with our women's soccer team, our men's soccer team, our women's volleyball team, field hockey team, and of course our football team. And so that was extremely challenging. And we know that the winter sports, those sports that are crossover sports like men's and women's ice hockey and swimming, and those sports that actually start competing in October and November, we have to have conversations about. And basketball the same way. I'm hopeful that the numbers, the pandemic numbers, subside and go down. I know in our state and in our county and in June, based upon what our governor had done, the numbers were going down, and then now they've gone back up, and now they're starting to go back down. So I'm hopeful as we get into the winter time frame, the numbers go down. Hopefully, tests emerge that are a lot better. And we can move faster. So I'm hopeful that we'll have a different view, a different handle on the pandemic as we move into the late October and November timeframe. So those decisions remain to be made, and I'm hopeful we can figure out a way to allow those sports to kick off.
Ohio State Athletic Director Gene Smith. Gene, thanks a lot for your time on what I know is a difficult day for everyone associated with Big Ten athletics. Really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I know all of our fans are disappointed, and I'm sorry. But our health and safety of our kids are so important. And I hope that you would, for every college campus and every student athlete, you continue to embrace them and support them. And whatever model we come up with for the spring, I would ask that you be patient with us and ultimately embrace that as well. So thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Thanks, Gene.
From Ohio State to Michigan, this from their athletic director, Ward Manuel. For the second time in 5 months, the Big Ten Conference made the unfortunate but necessary decision to postpone an athletic season in order to protect the health and well-being of our student athletes, staff, and community members. As a result, all fall sports schedules have been postponed. This latest decision was reached after careful consideration and the grim knowledge that this pandemic continues to affect our country adversely. I am deeply saddened for our student athletes and remain committed to our ongoing promise to provide them with a world-class education. We remain grateful to our global Michigan family for their unwavering support. So what does a head coach have to say, and how was his chat with his players about all this? Jeff Brom from Purdue joins us in 1 minute. From the University of Illinois, this is their chancellor, Robert Jones. The discussions that led to the decision to postpone fall sports were as frank and honest as they were difficult. We recognize the intense disappointment this will bring to our student athletes, coaches, athletic staff, and fans. But as important as collegiate athletic competition is to the Big Ten University experience, the health and safety of our students, staff, faculty, and campus community must be our priority. There are just too many unknowns with COVID-19 today, and the future continues to be just as unclear as it was months ago. We feel this decision offers the best way to maximize the safety of everyone involved, but that doesn't make it any easier to hear for any of us who love sports.
That is for sure. Here's what Mel Tucker, the new football coach at Michigan State, had to say, quote, "While the conclusion to postpone the season is not easy for anyone, based on the medical recommendations, I respect the decision of the Big Ten Conference. When the medical experts tell us that we can get back to business, we'll be ready. Until then, stay safe and go green." Again, a really challenging day for everyone involved in Big Ten athletics. Challenging, I know, for all the administrators who had to make those decisions. You heard Gene Smith talking to the individual teams. It's, of course, devastating for the student athletes, and it's devastating for the fans. And you and I count ourselves among those fans, and most of the people watching right now, I think, so. Yeah, I don't know why you would have stumbled upon this network.
Right. If
you weren't a fan, you know, this is the pattern of our fall. This is what our year is all about. That this is something that we all look forward to, that we have such passion for, and it is absolutely devastating. And you can see the weight of it on the people that we have spoken to today who are in that decision-making process. I mean, imagine Kevin Warren's situation coming into this leadership position and then 2 months later being hit with a worldwide pandemic and having to react in the way that he has. You can see how devastating it is for him. It's devastating for Gene Smith. It's devastating for all of us as fans because we want to see it and we love it.
Yeah, and it's certainly devastating for the players. We've already seen player reaction come in. Justin Fields was arguably the Heisman favorite next to Trevor Lawrence this coming fall. Just shake my head. That's all he can say there on Twitter. Peyton Ramsey, another quarterback in the Big Ten, now at a new school, just released sad. Now, maybe this will help the players and any fans out there, but we do know that the Pac-12, there are multiple reports out now that they also are canceling football for the fall. So as I mentioned to Howard, this might be the beginning of everyone canceling for all we know. Let's bring in Jeff Brom now, the head coach of the Purdue Boilermakers. And Jeff, if you had a vote today, if you were called to say what should we do, what would you have said?
Well, first off, I'm like others. I'm very disappointed, along with our players, that we don't have the opportunity to play football. That's what it's all about. You worked extremely hard to get that done. You know, there's a lot of things that could have happened possibly along the way that maybe could have helped this process. You know, whether we pushed back the season, earlier to that September 26th range to give us more time. I think that would have maybe given us more answers. But the fact of the matter is that we did not. And in the end, you have to agree with, you have to go with what the medical experts say and what they're telling our people. And we had a whole task force of people. And while just as a coach, maybe not agreeing with the trainer or doctor on your team, sometimes you have to, in the end, do what the league think is responsible. So I'm not going to second guess Commissioner Warren or our medical experts. Yes, I want to play football. Yes, it's disappointing we're not playing, and I wish we could play right now. But, for those that want to play football, I think moving forward from here, we've got to find a way to play in the spring, and I'm all for that.
I'm curious how much the sting feels a little better when you find out now that the Pac-12 is canceling, or if other major conferences will cancel as well.
Well, that was the question I had with our athletic director from day one is how can everyone get on the same page? And the Power 5 conferences get on the same page so that when they make a decision, we're all good with it and we roll with it. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, that didn't happen. So, I would love for that to happen, where everyone was talking and communicating at the highest level and making sure that we had all the information that all of our medical experts and teams could give so that the best decision was made in the end. And, in the end, it is about taking care of our players and making sure those that have that information make responsible decisions. And while as coaches and players, we don't agree with it, in the end, we have to support our experts.
I'm curious your thoughts. we're all sitting here kind of going, what changed? It wasn't even a week ago the schedule came out, and I think that's part of the whiplash maybe fans are feeling across the Big Ten. From your conversations with your AD, president, chancellor throughout the last couple of days, what do you get a sense of as the things that have changed?
Well, I think we're hopeful that we were going to try to find a way to contain this virus and manage it. And I do think on our campuses, we here at Purdue did a great job. We have a great team, and we had a great plan together. I think all the other Big Ten conferences and probably teams around the country have done a very good job. And I do believe it is safer for having our players here and having guys on campus and for us being able to monitor that. But as far as I know, it really wasn't until Saturday where I got some information that the medical experts and our commissioner got together and discussed in detail moving forward. And that's where things went south. And I don't know what was said exactly in the meeting. I don't know all the details. I was not on that meeting, but I think, it was a long meeting from what I heard of information that was shared and in their opinions on how to go forward and what to do. And from there, I think things just took a turn for the south. And that's how we got to this end result.
What can you tell me about the tone and the content of the meetings that you've had with university leadership in West Lafayette the last couple of days?
Well, we've had a lot of conversations amongst our staff here, amongst our Big Ten coaches. I know our athletic director has been having calls every single day. We all want to play. We all want to find a way to play, and we all wanted to play this fall. And I would have loved to play in a 12-game season. I would have loved, once we went to the 10-game conference season, to get that in. I would have loved to start it on time if we could. But in the end, I felt we needed to have other plans ready just in case. This virus right now, we don't have a vaccine, and unless you can manage it, there might be some questions you can't answer. So, it was finding ways to make this work. And like I said, I think we all felt good. We were moving in the right direction. We were doing everything possible from a team standpoint, an individual standpoint of taking care of our players. Obviously, the unknown of when guys came back on campus, what would happen there. That's what I thought we maybe were going to wait for, us to see, what was going to transpire when that happened, to see if maybe we can move forward. But obviously, the medical experts got together and, they felt they weren't comfortable moving forward, and we have to go with that decision. So like I said, I'm disappointed like everyone, and I know our team was devastated today. We had practice yesterday, today, things were going well. And in the end, we want to play football. So whenever that may be, we want to find a way to get it done.
You mentioned your team was devastated. How did you break the news to them, and how did they respond?
Well, our team has handled it well. I think, when training camp went to, hey, we're just going to have helmets on for a little while, people knew things were up and knew some things were happening, things were starting to leak out. So, it wasn't like it was a complete surprise that there were some things going on that we didn't know if would go in our direction or not. And fortunately, it did not. So our team kind of understood that there were some questions being made. There were some votes that were going to happen today. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. We were all hopeful for the best. When we got the news that it did not turn out that way, and we had to call a team meeting, I think everyone knew what was about to take place. So they're disappointed. These guys have worked their whole life and done a great job for us to getting in great shape, trying to get ready to have a great Big Ten conference schedule that we were excited about. And unfortunately, we can't play.
Jeff, what do you know about the immediate future? I mean, what do you guys do next? What does tomorrow look like? Next week? What does September look like for you guys?
Well, those are things that still need to be discussed and figured out from a Big Ten standpoint. And there have been long conversations about it. Has there been anything definitive set? I don't think so. And I'm sure over the course of the next few days, we'll do that. For right now, we want our guys to know that they have a home here. We're going to take care of them just like we normally would. We have another COVID test set up for tomorrow that we're going to continue to do those things. So I think it's all about finding ways to take care of your players, giving them an opportunity to prepare themselves to play at a high level, whenever that is. And that's what we talked about the last 3 or 4 days when this came about, is our job is to prepare ourselves to play at the highest level, to have fun playing the game, and we got to hope that we can. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen this fall, but in the end, we want a chance to compete and play.
Last one for you, Jeff. You've made a splash since you joined the Big Ten for multiple reasons. One of them is your ability to recruit. You've barely been there. You've got back-to-back Big Ten Freshman of the Year honors in your back pocket now. I'm curious if you've heard from recruits in the last handful of hours and what your message is to them.
Well, not lately. We haven't. I haven't really had time to check my phone a whole lot getting around our team. But, this has been tough. This pandemic has really done a lot of things that you have to adjust and try to find ways to make things happen. We haven't been able to get guys on campus like you wanted to. That's hurt our recruiting. We haven't been able to be around them and showcase what Purdue is all about. So, unfortunately, the virus has taken us over, and we're hopeful that medical experts and medical advances can happen here rapidly. We're hopeful that possibly a vaccine can happen here rapidly. And maybe we can possibly move forward and play. Like I said, maybe in the spring, maybe a vaccine, and we get more information. A vaccine happens in December or January. We get more information, and we learn from the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, and other sports of how we can manage it. So I'm still hopeful. I know our players are still hopeful. But as far as the recruiting aspect, we've got to do our part just to be honest with our guys, let them understand what's going on here. And unfortunately, it's this has changed the dynamics, and we've got to adjust.
Jeff, your team was going to be one of the most exciting ones to watch in the Big Ten this year, one of the most exciting ones in the country. So as a fan of the sport and of you personally, it is a bummer to say we will not be able to see you for a few months, but we do want to say thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, the story on this day, the Big Ten has announced the postponement of the 2020-2021 fall sports season, including all regular season contests as well as Big Ten championship games and tournaments. This includes not only football, but also cross-country, soccer, field hockey, and volleyball. Again, the hope is that the teams perhaps could play in the spring. We heard from the athletic director of Ohio State, Gene Smith. Here is what the president of OSU, Christina Johnson, had to say. As a former collegiate athlete whose career in sports was cut short by circumstances beyond my control, I deeply feel the pain, frustration, and disappointment that all our players, coaches, and staff and all Buckeye fans are feeling today. I will continue to work closely with athletic director Gene Smith, Coach Ryan Day, and all coaches and other leaders to return our student athletes to competition as soon as possible while staying safe and healthy. We're focused on supporting our student athletes in every way, ensuring their scholarships are still in place, and looking out for their health and safety and the health and safety of all our students as they continue to pursue their studies in these challenging times. For more perspective on this, we now welcome in our friend Bruce Feldman, a contributor here on BTN, of course, also of Fox Sports and The Athletic. And Bruce, I want to start with this. You have incredible contacts and perspective throughout college football. In the time that we have been on the air here since the Big Ten released its statement, the story is broken that the Pac-12 is going to follow suit and will also not play here in the fall. Give me a sense of what people are saying around college athletics in the aftermath of these decisions today.
Dave, I don't think they're shocked that the Pac-12 followed suit after the Big Ten's decision. I think a lot of people looked at it and said, you know what, if the Big Ten does it, the Pac-12 is immediately going to respond to that. All the signs were pointing to that. From talking to people within the Pac-12 last night after their coaches and AD meeting with the medical experts and Larry Scott, they had really spoken about issues that they were going to face in terms of ramping up the testing that needed to happen almost on a daily basis in several key hotspot areas around the conference and those teams. So I think in addition to maybe some of the things that you heard from Gene Smith from the interviews you had also with Kevin Warren, I think there were other issues that also extended even beyond that in the Pac-12. Now, Greg Sankey from the SEC and I think some of the other leadership around major college football has said, hey, we're going to be patient and we're not going to make a knee-jerk decision just because they did or they are about to. So we'll see how this plays out, I think, at this point, because one thing that I got the sense of is there seems to be a somewhat of a disconnect between what certain medical experts and advisors are telling one Power 5 leadership group compared to what they may be telling the ACC, certainly the SEC and the Big 12. And I think that's where there seems to be a divide. And quite honestly, this thing has gotten really political and it's gotten pretty messy in the last few days as well.
Yeah, to what extent now do you think there is pressure on other conferences? I mean, you mentioned that they won't necessarily follow suit, but do the optics start to change a little bit now that you have two of the Power Five, you have two of the Group of Five as well, the Mountain West and the MAC? How does this change the discussion?
Well, the part that I wonder about is where is the liability issue and how big of an issue is that really hanging over the leadership of college athletics and colleges, quite honestly. If that is something, especially based on some of the things that we've now learned from, at least in a small detail, as much as I know you tried to press Kevin Warren to be a little more transparent with some of those things. We do know a little bit on the hard issues and some of the challenges that seem to be discussed from the medical experts that the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 have talked about. So again, what are those liability concerns that you're going to have potentially for the other leagues? Challenge that they have always, in the SEC especially, have kind of been mindful of from talking to people in that conference is, look, we feel like we have a little better handle on how this relates to us playing football and how safe our athletes are in the facility. What's concerned them is what happens when the regular students come back to campus, and will there be a surge? Will there be an outbreak? And how do we manage that? And so they've tried to be very proactive on the schedule side, just like some of the other conferences, even the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were. But again, I think these are ongoing decisions. I don't think they're going to make hey, they did it, so now we're following suit. I think they're going to be more cautious on what their next move are. And if they have to delay a start even further, I think they would do that. But I don't think just because these two leagues have decided we're closing it down for the fall that they're going to follow suit.
We have seen players speak out. We have seen parents speak out. We've seen coaches speak out. How do you think the conversations around college football in specific and college athletics in general are changing in this world that we're living in?
Dave, I think what's really been interesting in the last couple of weeks is for a long time, we did not hear much from the athletes. I don't know how many schools actually wanted to make them available to the media. Well, now they have, through social media, really their own microphones, and we've heard their voices, and we're hearing more of it. And I do think that's a good thing. One of the things that I thought was pretty compelling was Scott Satterfield was one of many coaches who spoke out yesterday. We heard a bunch of guys from the Big Ten, Jim Harbaugh, James Franklin, Ryan Day, and so on. But I thought the message particularly that resonated, at least to me, was, hey, look, these players, these kids, these guys have done everything we've asked them to do, gone above and beyond what you would think would be normal to try to give themselves the best chance possible to have a season and do what they love most with their teammates. And it's not just about what they did in the facility, it's about a lot of discipline and those things. And for us to say, hey, if you do these things, we have a chance to play. And then to find out if you're, look, I think of Jonathan Cooper, one of the guys in the Big Ten. He could have gone to the NFL and the sacrifices he made. And those are the guys you feel the worst for because of the sacrifices they made. They felt like they probably did all the right things, and it's not going to happen for them right now. And that's the stuff that I think, I think about the most. You're going to hear a lot of sniping and back and forth with a lot of people about these things. It's the Jonathan Coopers of college football that I feel the worst for.
Bruce, along with this now, there are going to have to be decisions made at the NCAA level in terms of eligibility. What are you hearing on that front as to how this may impact these student athletes going forward and their eligibility to compete?
Well, I think that the conferences, I saw the Ohio State put out a release talking about how they were going to try to at least protect that and secure that, which I think is the right thing. But it's really unwieldy for a lot of these schools in terms of, I just had a lot of conversations with a bunch of people in FCS, and the biggest issue for them is roster management going forward. How does that work? Where you're going to be signing one class and it's going to come into another. Like the NCAA is going to have to be very flexible, I think. But then all of a sudden it becomes a matter of, it's not just the normal rules, it's the money that goes into protecting scholarships and those sorts of things. Right now, I don't think there's any real easy answers that have been addressed. I think the schools can say, hey, we're going to do the right thing. But I think one of the things that I've heard from talking to some of the players attached to, the Pac-12 player movement is, hey, look, these are issues, you can say you want to talk to us about, but we need something more in writing, or we need to feel something in more security, because again, right now, I think the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the leadership of college athletics is really on shaky ground.
Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports and The Athletic, as always, really appreciate your insights. Thanks a lot, Bruce.
Thank you, Dave.
Meanwhile, Jim Harbaugh has released a statement, the head coach at Michigan. Our student athletes and coaches want to compete. They have committed, trained, and prepared their entire lives for this opportunity, and I know how much they're disappointed at this time. I share in their disappointment today. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, more reaction from the news. The Big Ten has postponed the 2020 fall football season with hopes to play in the spring.
BTN Live again, covering the story no one really wanted to get to, but this is where we are. The Big Ten has postponed fall sports. A statement from the Big Ten Conference announcing the postponement of the 2021 fall sports season, including all regular season contests and Big Ten championships and tournaments, due to the ongoing health and safety concerns related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In making its decision, which was based on multiple factors, the Big Ten Conference relied on the medical advice and counsel of the Big Ten Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases and the Big Ten Sports Medicine Committee. A difficult day for all involved, including Commissioner Kevin Warren, who took the time to join us a little bit earlier.
I mean, one of the things that we promised ourselves, that this was going to be a fluid situation. This was going to be a day-to-day situation. And we would be on a perpetual state of just observing, gathering information, and doing everything we possibly could to have fall sports. That being said, our overarching, reason and the overarching issues that we had to always keep at the top of our mind was the fact, and I've said it from the first day that I started at the Big Ten, that the health, the safety, the wellness, and both physical and mental for our student athletes was going to be at the top of my list. And as things began to evolve, you look at the number of cases that are spiking, the number of deaths, not only in our country, in our states where many of our schools are located, but worldwide, is that I promise that all the decisions that we will make during my tenure here at the Big Ten will always put the mental and physical health and safety and wellness of our student athletes at the center. And when you look at this decision, we just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty at this point in time in our country, and to really encourage our student athletes to participate in fall sports. And I take this responsibility seriously, and I will continually do everything in my power to make sure that we put our student athletes in a position to be empowered and to be elevated, but as people first, and as students, and understand they're not professionals. These are amateur athletes, and they deserve an opportunity to be able to participate in a healthy and safe manner. There is so much uncertainty about this virus. This is a novel virus. It is spreading at alarming rates. I believe there's over 5 million people worldwide and 160,000 deaths that have occurred. This is a serious virus. And, we were able to start practice last week. So there are many times in these type of decisions that you can have great plans. And I want to commend all of our Big Ten 14, our 14 Big Ten institutions. They've done a wonderful job. And our student athletes have worked hard to prepare. Our coaches have worked hard, our athletic directors, our chancellors and presidents, and all of our administrators. Our senior women administrators and faculty athletic reps, people have come together to do everything we possibly could do to have a fall season. But as you get closer to, it's one thing to make plans, and then it's another thing to really to put those plans into place and to start seeing what's happening and hearing what's happening from a practice standpoint on a lot of the issues as far as, social distancing and contact tracing and, testing. There are just a lot of issues, not only in the Big Ten, but in society that we're trying to get answers to. And it's one thing to try to get answers in certain areas of your life. But then when there are certain other areas, especially when it comes to your health and safety, that a lot of the questions that we need to make sure that we have answered now that we were getting closer to really going to the next phase of practice and getting closer to actually to compete, to have competition, is that there are just too many uncertainties to feel comfortable from a medical standpoint to proceed forward.
I was the Big Ten commissioner, and not even an hour after the Big Ten announced it, the Pac-12 released a statement saying the Pac-12 CEO group voted unanimously to postpone all sport competitions through the end of the 2020 calendar year. The decision was made after consultation with athletics directors and with the Pac-12 COVID-19 Medical Advisory Committee, who expressed concern with moving forward with contact practice. The conference also announced that when conditions improve, it would consider a return to competition for impacted sports after January 1st, 2021. Longtime athletic director up in Madison, Barry Alvarez, good enough to join us. Now, Barry, we're trying to get a grasp on, not a week ago, a schedule was released and excitement was up and optimism was up, and now the season will not happen until the spring at best. What changed?
Well, I think as we get closer to the season, there were so many questions, medical questions that were unanswered or couldn't be answered. And as we move forward, we had to lean on our doctors and our medical professionals to get answers, and we just didn't have enough answers to move forward with practice, with physical practice or putting pads on and move forward towards the season.
How do you describe what the meetings were like the last couple of days?
They were hard. They were very difficult, emotional. I think to the person, everyone wants to play. Everyone wanted to play. They know how much the coaches and the student athletes wanted to get back on the field, how much the fans wanted to watch our student athletes participate. And so we kept asking, grasping for answers, trying to get those answers and see if there's any way that we could work it out. But there ended up being some things that we just couldn't answer.
There are folks out there, whether it's student athletes or whether it's fans, who are wondering, the schedule was set up so brilliantly with so much flexibility that the option of maybe just pushing back the timeline 2 weeks or 4 weeks or what have you, in case things like a rapid test result is able to be developed in that time frame. How seriously was just a delay, and not a delay all the way to the spring, considered?
Yeah, that was discussed at some point, but I think it came to a decision where our medical advisors, in consultation with our presidents and chancellors, just had some questions that I just think put a halt to all of it.
So when will you know what student athletes can do for the rest of the fall?
We have a pretty good idea that we have a plan for them as far as coaches working with student athletes. I think that's important. As of right now, we have 20 hours a week that they can work on skill work, meetings, et cetera. I think it's important that our student athletes stay active, that they make constant contact and with their coaches, spend time with their coaches in development and trying to improve themselves and improve as a team. So we think that's important, and I think right now it's set at 20 hours a week.
Okay, so going forward, it'll be a 20-hour a week for all fall sports, basically?
Yes.
Okay. You have been an AD for a while. You have connections all over the place. What have you heard from those outside of the Big Ten?
Everyone wants to know what we're going to do. We want to know what they're going to do. You know, everybody's looking for an answer. You know, I've talked to different people. You know, a couple have talked to me about considering playing in the spring. I think that's something that probably we owe our student athletes to look into and see if it makes sense.
Well, let's go a little deeper on that. I never played at a high level. I have heard trying to play 2 seasons in a 12-month span is almost impossible, is kind of how it's been phrased to me, which is what we would have if you were starting a season in the spring and then doing another one in the fall. Is that impossible?
Well, you know, fortunately, Paul Christ has lived that. He coached in one of the spring pro leagues several years ago. It was an entire season. It was a long season. A number of those players went straight from there to the NFL. And their experience basically says it is too long to have back-to-back full seasons. So, you know, his opinion, if you do something in the spring, it has to be a condensed, not near as many games as you would have in a normal season. And hopefully that if you do something like that, as you move forward and everything is cleared, you move forward into a normal season.
And discussions on specifics for that, I assume, are weeks, if not months away.
Yeah, we really haven't started about it. There's just been a little discussion about interest and the possibility. Just remember, we just announced our cancellation today, so we really haven't discussed much of it.
We're in this unprecedented time, and obviously if there weren't 160,000 plus deaths already from this, you know, who knows where we would be on this. Is there something that could have been done differently in the past few months so that a season would have been able to happen this fall?
No, I don't know. I don't know how you answer contact tracing. I don't have the answer for that. I don't know how you have contact tracing and play a contact sport. I just think that's very difficult. No one that I know of has come up with an answer for that.
That makes it sound a little maybe pessimistic that there even could be spring football in your mind.
Well, hopefully that we can have some testing that's quicker, that we can get quick results. I know we have one that's being worked on this campus. It's not full approval yet, but we have used it as a secondary test to help with their testing. But I think there are a lot of things that are happening now that maybe by spring we could get a test and an answer within an hour to make sure that you have a clean field as you go out to practice and play.
Right, because you could, in theory, test everyone at 6 a.m. and know by 7 o'clock who couldn't play and who could, right?
Yeah, our plan was to test before they went in for breakfast, and when they came out, have an answer.
Yeah. What would be your message, Barry, to fans, players, anyone who's frustrated with today's news?
Well, the decision's made. No one likes it. But we're in a pandemic, and it's very difficult to play sports and have answers to all these questions when your number one concern is this health and safety of our student athletes, our coaches, and everyone associated with the program. So it's how we respond to this. Let's respond positively. Let's move forward as student athletes. Let's get better as an individual and as a team. As coaches, let's support our student athletes and help them through this tough time.
Before we let you go, Barry, what would be on the checklist of things that need to happen for there to even be spring football with the Big Ten?
I think, first of all, all the administrators, coaches, you'd like to get some type of feedback from your student athletes. I think they like to play. Our guys wanted to practice. They wanted to practice. When they heard things, they wanted to go out and have another practice. They like to play. So I think we have to have some answers medically and then a good plan that makes sense for the student athletes, coaches, and administration.
Well, let's hope we get there, indeed. Barry, this is a tough day. We appreciate you giving us some of your time.
All right, thank you.
This statement from Jonathan Holloway, the new president at Rutgers, saying, quote, "The health and well-being of our student athletes and our entire community is our first and highest concern. The conference made the right decision to postpone the 2020 fall athletic season. No one is more disappointed than we are to see a delay in a season with such great promise for Rutgers, but it was the only decision to make in the face of the global pandemic." Our coverage continues here on BTN. This is a sight we will not see, unfortunately, in the fall of 2020. Much more on the cancellation, not just of football in the Big Ten, but of all fall sports, as our coverage continues from Chicago.
All right, here's the latest from Iowa's athletic director, Gary Barta, saying, my understanding of membership in the Big Ten is there's membership criteria, and playing outside the Big Ten would violate that criteria. That's not something we're looking at. That, of course, in reference to the fact that Nebraska has released an emotional statement saying they're continuing to look at ways to play.
A man who knows this league quite well, former Ohio State national championship head coach Urban Meyer, kind enough to give us some of his time. Of course, an analyst now, both here at the BTN and at Fox Sports as well. And Coach, let's start with this. Your reaction to the news today?
Heartbreaking, devastation. My mind has been trained for 35 years to think about the student athlete. And, I've recruited a lot of those guys, and I talked to Jonathan Cooper's mom just a minute ago, and I'm getting multiple texts from family members. And I love Ryan Day. I love Gene Smith. I love the Big Ten Conference, and just devastated.
What do you say to the parent of a student athlete? What do you say to student athletes who are crushed that they're not going to be able to play?
Well, Ohio State, we happen to have the best AD in America. And you got to trust that he's going to do everything in his power to do what's right for the student athlete. And he has done that. And same with our president is new, but she seems to be about the right thing. So, it's not your time as a coach or player to really give opinion about something as serious as pandemic and medical and causation. I'm hearing those words, and litigation and, future issues. So you just got to trust that the people care and love you, and go about your business and train as hard as you can. If there's a season, if there is. If not, and you're a senior and get ready for the NFL, you got to do that too. So, we live under the world of E plus R equals O, and that means you can't control events in your life. You can control how you respond positively and move forward.
Yeah, so what would be, as a coach, give us a sense of kind of what that next step is? I know you talk a ton about the response. You talk a ton about the psychology of sport, but here you are in this most unusual situation where you expected to have a season and you don't. How do you get guys to respond?
Yeah, once again, who knows what's going to happen? Right now, that's out of everyone's control. And all you have an obligation is continue to get ready in case. What happens if they delay it? What happens if all of a sudden they say spring practice? Those are all things that are on the docket.
Coach, finally, what would you think about the notion of playing spring football?
No chance.
Why do you say that?
You can't ask a player to play 2 seasons within a calendar year. When I first heard that, I said that. I don't see that happening. When I hear that, the body, in my very strong opinion, is not made to play 2 seasons within 1 calendar year. That's 2,000 competitive reps. And football is a physical, tough sport. So I really don't see that happening.
What if you were to abbreviate the season? What if you just play divisional games in the spring and then the fall season is what we had scheduled this year, maybe a 10-game season?
Why?
To give those kids an opportunity to compete?
Well, we recruited players at Ohio State that have the chance to earn a living and play the game and be rewarded for the great efforts. And you're going to ask them to play spring football, by the way, and then go miss OTAs and not prepare for a dream to go play in professional football. That's not fair, Dave.
Coach Urban Meyer, really appreciate your time. Wish you were under different circumstances, but thanks so much, Coach.
Thank you.
So strong opinion there from Urban Meyer. We heard Barry Alvarez talking about spring football again and the logistical challenges that it may present. And it may be a situation where not everyone wants to participate, just as there were many who said they didn't want to participate in the fall. Maybe it's for different reasons.
Right, and think of some of the great players who could be drafted in April instead of playing. Now, that doesn't mean the NFL wouldn't move the draft back if there is a large amount of college football players playing in March, April, and May. But yeah, that's a fascinating scenario because there will be plenty of people. I have heard from plenty of people who say exactly what Urban Meyer is saying, which is there's no chance you can do it to players to have 2 seasons in such a short time span. And I didn't quite understand. Again, I've never played at that level, but the basic gist of it was wear and tear is basically what I've been told on their bodies.
He certainly did not equivocate. Here's a statement from the Minnesota president, Joan Gable, as well as the athletic director, Mark Coyle. Quote, the Big Ten Conference and its member institutions have thoughtfully considered the latest public health data and advice of the Big Ten Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases and the Big Ten Sports Medicine Committee throughout the discussions about student-athlete safety and the viability of the conference's fall sports seasons. As of today, the medical evidence and expert perspectives presented to us as conference leaders raise serious concerns about the safety of playing fall sports. We welcome our student-athletes to remain on campus to study, to train, and to practice within Big Ten Conference and NCAA established limits. We are committed to the safest environment for all of our students, including our student-athletes.
All right, let's bring in former Buckeye player Joshua Perry right now. Joshua, the Big Ten dates back to the 1800s, and there will be no football this fall. When you heard the news, what was your reaction?
It's absolutely strange, but this is 2020. I mean, we're seeing everything strange happening. So first for me was disappointment. I'm disappointed mostly for the athletes that have been training their tails off so they could be able to compete this year. And you saw that we had this return to getting people on campus to a point where we felt like we could build up to a season. We saw this beautiful schedule with a ton of built-in flexibility. And now we're at a point where student athletes are going to have to figure out what their next step is because it's not going to be playing their season. So specifically for the football guys, I understand how much work has gone in. I understand that this game has such a finite window where you have to capitalize on every moment because you can only play it for so long. So I know there are a lot of emotions that are up with it. I'm feeling emotional just because I love watching college football and specifically Big Ten football. But, as these people have said, we're disappointed, but we're going to continue to move forward.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can be disappointed and still think this is the right decision. Is that where you are?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of the situation is I'm not a doctor, so it's really hard for me to make calls on this. And I think that deference to the medical professionals is big. And so I am very disappointed. But if that's what medical professionals think is the best thing to do, I'm not one to sit here and question that. Now, I can understand how student athletes would feel some type of way in this situation because we had this movement, that we want to play movement, where finally their voices were being heard. And now it kind of feels like they were drowned out because the medical professionals went against what they were trying to tell them. But the reality of the situation is until we can get something figured out and we have some more clarity on the risks associated with the coronavirus, this is the situation we're going to be in. And that's not to say football is not a risky game. The reason I left the game of football was because of concussions. It was because of the risk associated with it. But the reality of the situation is I knew what the risks were and I was able to assess them. And with this coronavirus, there are so many things we don't know quite yet, so it's hard to assess.
Joshua, I got to get your take on spring football as a possibility. If we're going to see football in the next 12 months, it will be in the spring. It will not be in the fall. We just had Urban Meyer on. He was unequivocally saying, no, you can't do spring football. We had Barry Alvarez on. He basically made it seem like there are logistical issues, but it's been done before by other people. How feasible is it, playing what would then be a season in the spring and then another one in the fall just a few months later?
I think it's tough. I truly don't like the idea, and it's for a number of reasons. I think the logistical issues are there. First and foremost, you have to figure out what you're going to do with your rosters, and you're going to have guys that are going to want to have their eligibility back that would have been going out the door. You're going to have some players that will leave. We've seen a big trend where high school players are starting to enroll early, so you have to decide what you do with those guys. So I think it's a mess from that standpoint. I do think the wear and tear is a big issue, although in the NFL they'll play 4 preseason games and 16 regular season games. So it's not out of the question, but those players are professional and they're getting paid a wage to do so. And they have all the time in the world in the off season to take care of their bodies. But the reality of the situation too is you can't convince me that spring football is going to have the same competitive spirit and it's going to matter as much as playing in a fall season. Like I'm just imagining whoever wins the championship, the team wearing shirts that say 2021 spring football champions. It doesn't sound right. So there are a lot of issues that go along with it. I prefer a fall season. Obviously, I would enjoy watching football in the spring just because I'll miss it so much, but I don't think it feels the same.
So what I don't quite get is what is the proper amount of time? If you're, an Ohio State player and you play a 12-game season and then a Big Ten championship game is 13, and then you play 2 playoff games, that's up to 15 games you would play. And then you'd have 8 months off until the season, except you'd have spring practices and you'd have a spring game, etc. In this situation, you'd play spring ball in March, April, and May. There would be no actual spring ball the way we know it. And then you'd have June, July off. Maybe the season doesn't start until September or something, and it's a shorter schedule. that would be like 3 months off. That wouldn't be enough? Is there a number that would be?
Well, and I think that's kind of where you have to get with it, is if you're going to play in the spring, I think the spring season has to be a shortened version. Then you turn around, I feel like the fall season has to be shortened as well. And then it's up to the coaches, I guess, to decide what you really want to do in that time. Like you see some coaches that finish in December with their bowl game and they want to start their spring practice right in February. You see other people push it back to the middle of March or to April to where they want to start their spring practice. So to me, you feel like you got to give those guys probably a 3-month window, and then truly having that spring practice is a great tune-up for the young players who enroll early to get on the field, for players who've been in the program but haven't played a lot to get those reps. That's really important, but you also do have that recovery time throughout the summer, and I know that's used very wisely. And that's also to say, too, that winter training and summer training are two completely different types of training. In the winter, we were going for strength. We were trying to get guys bigger and stronger. In the summer, we were really going for speed and working on football drills and agility so guys would be able to get on the field and play. So there are going to be a lot of issues in terms of how you want to manage this time if you end up playing in the spring and the fall. Like I said, from a wear and tear standpoint, it's not totally out of the question, but it just doesn't feel right compared to what we're used to doing.
Good insight. Joshua Perry, thanks as always, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we're just about to wrap up our coverage of the breaking news. The Big Ten will not have fall football in 2020. There's a few quotes in particular jump out to me, and we start with the commissioner. He said their overarching thing was the health, safety, and wellness of the student athletes, and that was hard to get past. That the medical experts had been telling him there is too much uncertainty right now, and it's not worth the risk to go forward. And I think when we talked with Gene Smith, hearing him say that the contact tracing is just not where they needed it to be, those are three pretty legitimate reasons to not put student athletes in that position.
No doubt. I mean, I think these are incredibly difficult circumstances. Right. These are, you have used the word a couple times today, unprecedented, because it is the right word. We have not been in a situation like this, and to be thrust into a leadership role and to have to make decisions when you can't see the future, right? That is what leadership is about. They want to play. I mean, football is a huge part of what makes the Big Ten special, and let's be honest, there's a lot of money involved in it. That money is really important to running athletic departments. So to make those decisions, it's not something that was taken lightly. Thanks to all who joined us. Mike Hall, I'm Dave Revson. We leave you with these thoughts. Fall Saturdays are so much more than a day. They aren't just another square to cross out on a calendar. No, they function as an invisible compass, guiding all of us as the days grow shorter, the leaves turn, and the breeze stiffens. Fall Saturdays provide comfort in the familiar, lifting the curtain to our treasured stages, reviving cherished traditions, renewing enduring rivalries. Fall Saturdays are the only day that can remind you exactly where you were when this.
Nebraska wins the game! Oh, baby!
And this.
Marcus Allen blocked it, and Grant Haley takes it to the house!
And this happened.
The Spartans win again! The Spartans win again!
This fall, there will be Saturdays, but they won't be fall Saturdays. Our stage is empty, our traditions on hold, our rivalries eager for a return. 125 years of fall Saturdays don't just disappear. No, we know that at some point they will return. We'll miss you, Big Ten football. Let the wait, as agonizing as it may be, begin.